In this video, we are going to go over how to graph linear inequalities. As you can see, we have the 7 steps needed listed here on the screen. First, we need to determine if we are going to be using a solid or a dashed line. Step 2, identify the slope. Step 3, identify the y-intercept. Step 4, plot the y-intercept. Step 5, use the slope to find all your other points on the line that you can graph on our graph. Step 6, use a ruler to draw your line. And step 7, you need to figure out what side to shade and shade that side. Let's look at an example. Well, before we get to an example, let's take a look at our key concept here. How do we know when to use a dashed line or a solid line? It is very similar to when we used a solid circle or an open circle. If it has the or equals to part with the inequality, you are going to use a solid line. If it has just the inequality without the or equals to, you will use a dashed line. Now that we know that, we should be ready to go ahead and look at an example. So here we have y is less than or equal to negative x plus 5. If this was not an inequality, if it was an equal sign, and it looked like this over here, that would be in slope-intercept form. That is the easiest way to graph. The same thing applies even though we don't have the equal sign, we have a less than or equal to. Our y-intercept is still going to come from this number. It is the 0.05. And our slope is still going to come from the number with the x. So my slope is a -1. Slope, we need rise over run, so we would have -1 over 1 or 1 over -1. I kind of did those a little out of order. I did the y-intercept before the slope. Doesn't really matter. Those two steps are kind of interchangeable. Do we need a solid or a dashed line? Well, we have the or equals to, so that means we're going to want a solid line. Now we're ready to just graph like we did when we had an equation. So we need to plot our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is the 0.05. He is right here. Then we need to go down 1 and to the right 1. Down 1 to the right 1, down 1 to the right 1, down 1 to the right 1, and we're going to continue to do that until we fill in our graph. Our other option would be to go up 1 and to the left 1. So now we filled in all the points on our provided graph. We want a solid line, so we're going to go ahead and draw our line through here. Now we have to figure out what side are we going to shade. Our equation says y is less than. Well, if my y value is right here at a 5, which values are less than on the y-axis? That would be everything down here. So we want to shade all of this. Let me make this a little bit wider. So all of this part of the graph below that line would need to be colored in. So we can go ahead and shade this all in. With a pencil, it's going to look a lot better on your paper than it does here on my screen, but you need to neatly shade in the entire part of the provided graph that is below that line. Let's look at a second example. Here we have y is less than -1/3 x plus 3. Well, it does not have the or equals to part, so we're going to use a dashed line. My slope is that -1/3, so I'm going to have a -1 over 3 or a 1 over -3. My y-intercept comes from this number. It is the 0.03. So I can plot 0, 3. Now I can use my slope. Go down 1 to the right 3. Down 1 to the right 3. Now my other option would be to go back to my y-intercept, go up 1 and to the left 3. Up 1 and to the left 3. Now when we draw our line, we want to use a dashed line. For me, on this iPad, the easiest way for me to do it is to draw the solid line and then go back with the eraser, or else I would not have a very straight line. Be a little bit easier for you to do the dashed with a pencil than it is on my iPad screen. So I'm going to go back and make this a dashed line. So we have our line. Our final step is we need to figure out what part do we need to shade. Well, we want to shade everything that is less than. Our inequality read y is less than. So where is my y value less than that line? It is going to be everything below. So again, let me make this tip a little bit wider. And we're going to fill in and neatly shade every part of the graph that is below that line. And again, yours is going to be a lot neater because you can shade easier with a pencil than I can here on this iPad screen. So once you've shaded in all the parts of the graph that you needed to, we have completed example number 2. Let's look at another example. Here we have a x is greater than or equal to -2. If you remember, x equaled a number was a specific type of line, and it was a vertical line located at the x value of whatever that number was. Our inequality here tells us that we will need a solid line, and so we can go ahead and draw our line. We know it is a vertical line at x equals -2, and it's solid, so we're going to just go ahead and draw our line. Now we need to figure out, what do we need to shade? Well, this says x is greater than or equal to. So what side of this line are the x values greater than -2? Well, that's going to be over here to the right. So we can go ahead and shade in every part of this graph to the right, because that is where the x values are greater than the -2. And I'm going to keep repeating myself. Again, yours on paper, your assignment should look a lot better than this because it's a lot easier to shade with a pencil than it is here on my iPad screen. But you should be shading in the entire part of that graph that meets the requirement. Let's look at a fourth example. Here we have a y is greater than or equal to -5. This is also one of our special lines. This one would be a horizontal line, if you remember from previous chapter when we graphed lines. Y equaled -5 would be a horizontal line located through the y-axis at that -5 on the y-axis. So we can go ahead and draw our horizontal line. And now we need to just figure out, what do we need to shade? Well, our inequality was or equals to, so that's how I got the solid line. And this says y is greater than. So what side of that line is greater than that -5? Well, the y values get larger as you go up, so everything above that line would need to be neatly shaded in with your pencil. And again, I'm going to repeat myself one more time. Yours should be a lot neater than this because you can fully actually shade with your pencil a lot better than I can with this stylus on an iPad. Let's look at another example. Here we have y is less than 2/5 x minus 2. So this isn't one of our special lines, vertical or horizontal, so we can actually follow through all of our steps. Our inequality does not have the or equals to, so this is going to be a dashed line. Our slope is the number attached to that x, so we have a 2/5 or a -2 over a -5. My y-intercept comes from that number, and it is 0, -2. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and plot our y-intercept, 0, -2. Use our slope, go up 2 and over to the right 5. If I go up 2 again, I don't have enough to go over another 5. So I'm going to go back to the y-intercept and this time go down 2 and to the left 5. So now I have all the points and it's time to just draw our line. And again, for me with the iPad, it's easier for me to draw the line solid first and then go back and erase. With you having a pencil and a worksheet, it's going to be easier for you to just go ahead and draw the dashed line from the beginning. But again, I'm working with an iPad and it's a little bit more challenging than the paper and pencil. So now we have our dashed line. Now we just need to determine what side are we going to shade. The equation says y is less than. So we want everything that is less, y values that are less than that line. So the y values get smaller as they go down. So we would go ahead and shade in neatly with your pencil. Again, yours is going to look better than mine. All of the graph that is below that line. Okay, let's look at one final example. Our last example, we have a y is greater than or equal to 5/4 x plus 1. So my inequality tells me we need a solid line. My slope is the number attached to the x, the 5/4, or they're both negative, so -5, -4. My y-intercept comes from that value right there, so 0, 1. We can go ahead and plot 0, 1 on our graph. Go up 5 and over 4. Go back to your y-intercept, go down 5 and over 4. So now that I have all the points, I can go ahead and draw my solid line through there. All that's left to do is to determine what part do we need to shade. Well, our inequality said y is greater than or equal to. So where are my y values greater? That would be above this line. So we're going to neatly shade in everything on this graph that is above that line. And we have answered our 6th example. Hopefully this video has helped you understand how to graph linear inequalities. As always, if you have questions during class, don't hesitate to ask.